I remember the day it all began, the moment when my life twisted into a dark spiral of ridicule and despair. It was a bright Sunday afternoon, the kind that made everyone feel a little too comfortable in their own skin. My family gathered at my sister's house, laughter echoing through the air like the clinking of glasses. I sat at the edge of the living room, feeling like an outsider, my heart heavy with the weight of my obsession. I had just been fired from my job as an urban pest control technician for daring to suggest that we were facing something beyond the ordinary, a swarm of unnatural vermin emerging from the bowels of an ancient church. "Can you believe this?" My brother laughed, a cruel edge to his voice. "Mark thinks he's some kind of ghostbuster now." The laughter that followed cut deeper than any knife. They didn't understand. They couldn't see the truth lurking beneath the surface, the horrors that twisted and churned in the shadows. "You'll lose your mind, Mark," my mother chimed in, her face a mask of concern that felt more like disdain. "You need to get a real job, not chase after ghosts and monsters." I wanted to scream, to tell them that I had seen things, felt things that defied logic. But instead I sat silently, the shame coiling around me like a noose. And so I left, my heart shattered and my resolve hardened. I would prove them wrong. Years passed, a blur of urban decay and dimly lit catacombs. I became an anomalous exterminator, a title that sounded absurd even to me. I documented every encounter, every infestation of the supernatural vermin that had become my life's work. I learned to track their movements, to predict their patterns, and I fought them where they thrived, in the depths of forgotten places. Each success brought me one step closer to the validation I so desperately craved. But the world was still blind, and my peers continued to mock my methods, dismissing my findings as hysteria. Until one day, I received an urgent call, a city in chaos, overrun by the very vermin I had warned them about. My heart raced as I entered the dark, moldy depths of the abandoned subway tunnels, armed with only my tools and the knowledge I had painstakingly gathered. The air was thick with a stench that clawed at my throat, and the shadows seemed alive, whispering secrets of the damned. I fought through the tide of grotesque creatures, each more terrifying than the last, abominations of nature twisted by something far darker. I emerged victorious, but not unscathed. The horrors I faced scarred me, but they also transformed me into something more than a mere exterminator. I became a beacon of truth in a world that preferred to ignore the darkness lurking just beneath their feet. And then I returned home. The same house where my family had once ridiculed me, now a place suffocated by the weight of their disbelief. I stood at the threshold, the door creaking open like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. My heart raced with a mixture of dread and anticipation. They had seen the news, the reports of my work going viral, the recognition I had finally earned. Now I was no longer the family disgrace. I was a warning. "Mark!" My sister's voice broke the silence. Filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Regret? I stepped inside, the air heavy with tension, and the moment I crossed the threshold, I felt it. The familiar presence of the unnatural lurking just beyond the walls. "Look who's back from the dead," my brother sneered, but there was a tremor in his voice. "What, did you bring your little ghost friends with you?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the center of the living room, the walls closing in around me like a vice. I had come to show them the truth. "Listen," I said, my voice steady but low. "You think I'm crazy, but you have no idea what's out there. I've seen things, horrors that you wouldn't believe. And they're coming." Laughter erupted again, but it was weaker this time, laced with uncertainty. I could feel the shadows creeping closer, the air growing colder. "Let me show you," I said, and I reached into my bag, pulling out a small vial filled with a thick, dark liquid, a sample from the last infestation I had faced. I held it up, the contents swirling like a storm. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a low rumble echoed from the darkness beyond the walls. My family's laughter died, replaced by a palpable fear that hung in the air. "What is that?" my mother whispered, her eyes wide with terror. The shadow shifted and writhed, and I knew in that moment that the horrors I had faced were not just a part of my past. They were here. And they were hungry. The walls of the house began to tremble, and the very foundations seemed to groan under the weight of something unseen. I stepped back, watching as my family's faces twisted with fear, their disbelief crumbling like dust. "Mark, what have you done?" my sister cried, her voice shaking. "Nothing," I said, my voice barely audible over the cacophony of chaos. "This is what you mocked. This is what you didn't believe." And then, as if summoned by my words, the shadows surged forth. A tide of unnatural shapes and forms, crawling out from every crevice, every corner of the room. My family gasped, their faces paling as they witnessed the very horrors I had fought against, the terrors they had once laughed off. As the shadows enveloped them, I stood frozen, a mix of vindication and horror flooding my veins. They finally understood. They had faced the consequences of their ridicule. In the end, I was left standing alone, the darkness swirling around me, a crown of shadows that whispered the truths I had uncovered. I had become what they feared, a guardian against the very nightmares they had dismissed. And as I walked away from that house, the weight of their disbelief echoing in my mind, I knew that the world would never ignore the darkness again. I had survived what they could not face, and in that survival lay my chilling triumph. Shadows would always be a part of me now, a haunting reminder of the cost of disbelief and the price of truth.